It's like purifying gold. The work that we do, it's like constantly working on purifying our lives, the mind. It's like gold, 24 karat gold, the purest. We often talk about, mention the briefest, the most succinct way of describing the Buddha's Dhamma, his teaching, as doing or not doing what is unwholesome or unskillful, doing and engaging in acts that are wholesome, and purifying the mind. For some reason, many of us take this work a little bit lightly sometimes. Something that needs to be achieved, a goal that needs to be arrived at with some level of ease, with some level of smooth sailing. And to my understanding and experience, I can attest to the fact that it's anything but smooth sailing. And if you've ever meditated, even for 5 minutes, you know that to be the case often. Now, fortunately, it's not always strewn with difficult obstacles and hindrances here and there. But the mind makes it so. After all, the hindrances are not necessarily coming from the outside world. They are generated by the mind, given the memories, given the associations from different parts of our past experience. And yes, it can be overwhelming. Oftentimes I hear people say, well, what to do with the world situation, Bhante? What to do? You have to understand, my wife or my husband, my situation is quite unbearable, etc. The world is difficult to bear. Yes. But the Buddha mentioned several things that are always going to be changing. Years ago, when I first started my journey in studying the Dhamma, exploring it, I would just add these different, numbers of these different criteria that the Buddha, these different formulaic structures, if you will. And I would remember them, I would just remember them, memorize them, and they would be like my badges. Yes, I know what the 3 declarations are. Yes, I know what the 4 Noble Truths are. Yes, I know what the 12 links of causal relations. Who cares? Ultimately, when we are in the middle of it, difficult situations, can we back ourselves up, in a sense, without losing ourselves within the upheavals of that moment? And that's where I see this beauty, this tiny little droplets of sati whenever they come in. And if we can maintain those and link them up, instead of taking it for granted. No. I've done enough meditation in my past, so I'm good. I can handle this difficult situation. And that is part of conceit, that we all So long as we're not arahants, we all have that. So when I'm suggesting to have our own backs, what I'm referring to here is to be trusting ourselves enough to say, but at the same time saying, you know what, I need to bring in my practice into this experience. I need this. I need to reconnect. Use whatever you have. Don't be so dogmatic with your meditation object. Sometimes I see students becoming so attached to their meditation object. Well, this is the thing which got me to the first jhana, so I'm going to stick to that. Or the fourth jhana, or whatever. Sometimes we don't have that luxury. Life is happening so fast. Things are changing so fast. And the more we develop in this practice, the more life throws at us heavier and heavier and heavier to bear situations. So they're very much related. Our practice, our understanding, and if we're getting insights, even more so. We cannot put them in this, safety deposit box of insights. Not to be touched, only, no. All of those insights mean nothing when we lose it when confronted by a difficult situation. When we break precepts, for example, or lose the stability of mind. So insight, yes, it's important, absolutely important. However, sati has to be all throughout. Mindfulness has to be all throughout your life, not just the practice. Because sati is going to take us, the more familiarized we get with it, while living life, equanimity will come into the scene. It will become much more natural for us to be equanimous even when the situations dictate that we should go berserk, crazy, losing it, if you like, in front of difficult situations. But for some reason, the equanimous mind is just observing. I've had students who come to me and say, there's something wrong. Why? Well, because all these nasty things are happening, these difficult, some of my worst nightmares, in fact, from the past are coming true. However, the mind is so still. Am I indifferent? Am I unable to translate, interpret what's happening to me? Am I basically going crazy? Far from it, in fact. That's your sati, your mindfulness bearing fruit. Then when equanimity comes in, usually it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that we might have read about or heard about. An arahant is not someone who jumps around in celebration. The Buddha would call that mad behavior. One time, I believe it was Venerable Ananda who asked him about dancing. And the Buddha called that mad behavior. So you see on the other side, you see another aspect of the depth of mind, meaning the serenity of the individual. So here I'm trying to encourage you to make room for that capacity of the mind to go that deep, which requires, again, a level of trust in your own mindfulness that you are cultivating every time you sit. So in other words, I'm trying to say a few words of encouragement here so that we can move away from sensationalizing meditation, which I see often taking place, especially now in the world. The bells and whistles. Which has a little bit more of a purity when you're approaching it like this. Avoiding those sensationalistic approaches and expectations, which puts extra pressure on you. Life is already difficult, folks. We don't need to make it even more unbearable. That's why I try to emphasize the trust in your goodness part, which kind of relaxes your facial muscles and everything else that goes along with it. Now, I know during our last session I did mention about you looking around and seeing if you have any questions, and so that we can spend today's this portion of the of our session rather on questions. So I'm just going to jump into that, but I just felt the need for me to say a few words in the beginning. So please, this is the time where I would love if you could share some of your thoughts, your questions and comments, so that I can try to address them as best as I can. Yes?
Thank you for that, Bante. It was very well timed. Yeah, so thank you. My question, I've got two questions. I can maybe leave one to a bit later. First one's actually for the other Anthony that joins every now and then, but he's offshore at the moment, so he hasn't been able to join in. One of the he had like, you won't mind me saying, he had a really difficult year. Previous to that, he was making some really good progress, and after that difficult year is sort of coming to an end, he still feels like he's like hyper aware of everything that's going on, but his motivation to actually pick up the practice again is like, I think it's close to zero, and he's struggling with that because he knows he has to, and he's aware of everything that seems to be going on. Like, I don't know if you can maybe like speak on that a little bit, or give him a sort of advice.
It would be a suggestion, of course, what I would offer here. But the way you were describing it, I couldn't help but feel like a kid, like when I was in high school or elementary school, when my mom or my parents would want, or my teachers would want me to do a certain task or score a certain, GPA or whatever. So it became a chore, like it was just a goal that needed to be achieved to appease someone other than me. Many of us approach meditation because of various reasons, but typically it has something to do, I noticed often, with gaining acceptance, gaining a pleasing remark, or just feeling good, or having read about other meditators having reached a certain state of calm, for example, or happiness, or joy, or even supramundane states. The list goes on. And then sometimes we get those gifts here and there, if we are persevering, if we're doing it right to some degree. And sometimes we suppress the hindrances so much that it becomes one-pointed practice, which can help the mind to experience some form of that calm, but it is highly conditional. Meaning, the moment that forceful, suppressive energy is pulled away, and life will definitely pull that away, everything comes loose, everything falls apart. And the person now tries to force their way into that state, whatever that may have been. Force their way into that. When meditation is supposed to be the opposite. It's allowing. It's gladdening the mind. When you're reading the Buddha's words in the Satipatthana, he's always mentioning that. Gladdening the mind, opening the mind. Constantly. There's this coming, just opening, unfolding. It's like a pomegranate that just came open, like you just, all the seeds fall out. Juicy seeds come out. Or like a flower. Finally uncoils itself. It cannot do that. You cannot go ahead and force the flower to open up its petals. You could. You know what that will turn it into. But that necessitates then a different mental state. Because sooner or later this individual will feel guilty. Just like that child would feel guilty if they are not getting those straight A's or high, 90 percentiles on their exams. Because their focus has become just that. Instead of really seeing what it is that they're really doing from moment to moment. Because the moment the person is uncoiling the mind, by the way, that takes place by the third noble truth. By utilizing, that is, the third noble truth. When you're taking that thing which is holding the mind in place, tight, not allowing it to breathe, and now you're letting it go, meaning the craving is coming off. And the child is being allowed to, you know what, you can go ahead and enjoy that science project. You can, let's look at it in a different way. Why does meditation have to be only about you sitting for an hour or two? Who cares about that? By the way, the Buddha never put that time limit. I've always had that question, like 1 hour of walking, 1 hour of sitting, 1 hour of walking. Who made that up? The Buddha didn't. Some guy somewhere on a retreat came up with that. Or some woman, I don't know. Has nothing to do with the practice, because ultimately that 1 hour doesn't mean much. I care more about you getting up from that meditation, going to the toilet, and defecating. Where's your mind then? Are you observing every single nuance? Meaning, are you enjoying the whole process? Because that's life. The sitting part was not life. Because the person was not enjoying it. Now, if the person was, if they were to sit or walk meditation and just fall in love with every single touch of the foot against the grass, for example, every time the foot touches the ground, it's like, wow. It's like kissing the ground. I heard one time Thich Nhat Hanh said that, and that's the thing that stuck with me. It's just a beautiful image. So when the person is approaching it in that sense, I don't see the presence of guilt anymore. And therefore, I don't see the suppressive quality. I need to sit again so that it would be like last year's sittings. Who cares about last year? That's last year. Am I alive now? Okay. Can I practice now? Can I have fun with this practice? See what's happening? Change of attitude. That would be something I would offer.
Thank you, Bante. I know Anthony very well, and I know that's going to be a really, really amazing answer for him personally.
I'm glad.
Yeah, thank you.
Then I will be posting this so he could listen to it again. Yes, sorry, KK, you had your hand up. Yes.
I just want to say that what I learned in these sessions, I do apply it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I do apply it to my life, and I feel that they are very, very helpful. So just to give a conclusion of the saddest thing I share with this group is that a colleague that I really admire was in the ICU, and subsequently he was in the do not resuscitate, and he actually finally passed away today. But because I've been taking these classes, and I actually found that out right before I started, so I cannot, I have to admit, my mind was distracted, not because I was in grief, but because I need to tell his people who are dear to him during the meditation. But I myself really learned from you when what happened to your uncle in Armenia, that I say, wow, you can really stay so calm. And about this particular colleague, I think last time I shared that I really learned from him, because he said, tell all his students, you won't get an A in my class because, he's in political science, because you're not there. But I want all of you to strive to get an A in life. And this is, I feel, pretty much similar to what you told us to do during meditation. I mean, not to kind of think, but really focus on ourselves to try to get an A in our own life without people noticing. I mean, it's not like to do it to show off, to do it for anything. And I feel that because I continue to be inspired by this colleague, and I'm going to tell all my classes, all my students this year, I'm stealing this line from Professor James Kong, who want all of you to get an A in life. So I feel that, even though I want to share this because I think many of us are going through losses because of COVID. I mean, so many people died. And I think this is a really good way to kind of think that Buddha died, but we're still learning from him today. And I just feel that if your life can be an example, there's nothing better. We're all going to die. So I just feel that this meditation is really good to focus on ourselves and to be, not to think about, we're going to get happy, but to just say that maybe we'll be a better person, when we think about that all through the day, about what we were doing during the meditation. So I just want to thank you. It really helped me in coping with losses.
It's thank you for sharing that, and it's the last part that you said about coping with losses. That was something that was happening at the time of the Buddha quite often, just like they are now. For some reason, we have this rose-colored glasses when we look at inspirational stories, specifically in this context of the suttas or the Buddha's life and the encounters he had with different people from different capacities, different walks of life. But we do also glean in, we see how many people came to him with some very, very severe life situations of loss, betrayal, hurt, and many of the teachings of the Buddha rose from people coming to him asking for a cure, a treatment, a healing. So these are not just principles the Buddha gave, the Four Noble Truths, for example. Yes, the Buddha gave the Four Noble Truths in, we call it in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, for example, from the Samyutta Nikaya, which is turning the wheel, which is what the Buddha does, a Buddha does, and that designates the beginning of his dispensation. When he was giving it to the 5 disciples, he was seeing the pain they were in, which is the pain of ignorance, which is the worst kind of pain, because it brings about all the others. So the Four Noble Truths stem out of the need to provide a cure. And the mind likes to latch on to things. Let's say here, your colleague, the professor. I'm sure you have plenty of memories that can bog you down if you play those memories in an unhealthy or unwholesome way. And that is where you can apply the Four Noble Truths. Now, of course, you can reminisce and look at your colleagues' brighter comments, like the one that you shared, for example, and that brightens up the day, just like it brightened up your face as you were relating it. However, using wisdom to be able to differentiate memories, stories in our lives in the context of the mind constantly trying to latch onto something, which is its habit of identification. Always. It's always there. It's always trying to identify. It could identify earlier, for example, with Chitta's question on this other yogi, other meditator who wanted to relive past meditation, for example, something that we've all gone through or do go through at one point or another. So there was an element of identification, latching on, which the Buddha called tanha, or thirst, craving, longing for things to either stay the same if they're pleasant, or for them to change if they're unpleasant or painful. So what I'm trying to say here again is trying to pull these principles out from the suttas, from the Buddhism as such, pulling them out, teasing them out, and including them in our lives, making them more relevant to us. As long as we're continuing to meditate and process, because then they have a different weight to them, a different significance. And eventually, our lives start to become the Dhamma, which is one of the most beautiful things. Beautiful ways of turning that dirty lump of gold into pure gold. And you guessed it, it has everything to do with work. Meditation is mind work. So we can't put it on automatic pilot at any point, as far as I'm concerned. It cannot be done like that, where it's on automatic pilot, okay. Which means if it's on automatic pilot, it means there's no sati. There isn't any clear comprehension, meaning there's no seeing through. There's no yoniso manasikara, or wise attention, which needs to be there. And the Buddha says, without yoniso manasikara, you cannot attain nibbana, period. But again, it's not a list of things that we need to go through. Life already is providing us with many, many instances where these things become suddenly applicable. But ultimately, I think the way I like to approach it anyhow is to bring in that fun element. Not to make it that very tedious chore, like when you're preparing for, your oral examination, for example, or any exam. So, yeah. Thank you for relating that very personal part of your story. Any other thoughts, questions, comments, critiques? Silence is always uncomfortable for some people. I hear that during sessions in psychotherapy. But that could be used as a therapeutic intervention in the hands of someone who's mindful. Yes, I think, Matthias, did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Yes, please, go ahead.
An idea of question,
yes, please.
I've been doing different practices like Zen and Vipassana and Trim. So I don't know, like I feel a little bit pressure to only pick one, but then I'm also like trying to combine them, or like maybe take the twin to of this to the other practices. Like so I don't know.
I'd like to ask you, when you were doing either one of these, whether it was Zen, whether it's TWIM, when you were doing these, were you just exclusively doing, let's say, picking one of them at a certain time period? Or were you mixing them at that time as well?
Well, it's been varying, like I kind of resort to Zen because that's the one I've done the most, like doing nothing. And now I got from actually this Delson, he commented that Tim is kind of like doing nothing, or like in a way, like that, just to observe and without trying. Like,
to observe without trying. Did I understand you right?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Like, observe the meditation object, like metta. And yeah, well, I'm actually going for a Vipassana retreat soon, so that's also like why I am having these questions.
That's a good question to have before a retreat. You don't want those 10 days to be, I'm presuming they're 10 days or 2 weeks. Okay. Well, when you were describing your situation, it's again something that most of us, if not all of us, have fallen into. It's like a groove that we fall into. You know, it's like a groove on the ground. If it's a granite, you're going to kind of get stuck. And I was presented in my mind with an image or story that you probably have heard as well. There were two friends. One of the friends was very poor, and he constantly complained that life has given him, you know, the short end of the stick. That's what he always got. He never got lucky in life. Meanwhile, his friend is very rich. And one day his friend says, "Here you go, I'm going to give you the keys to my farm and to my home. You see this lot, this garden, this front of the house?" He says, "Yes." He says, "Underneath this ground, there's plenty of gold. Gold. And here's a pitch, and here's a fork, here's a hoe. You go ahead, have fun for 1 month. I will come back in 1 month. But in 1 month, after when I come back, you need to leave. You cannot stay. Whatever you've taken, it's all yours. I'm giving it to you for free." And long story short, a month later, he comes. The friend comes back and sees nothing but holes everywhere in the ground, like gopher holes. And he goes, what did you do? And the friend, obviously, the poorer friend, starts yelling and screaming at this other gentleman, says, "You lied to me. There's no gold here." And his friend asks, "Did you dig? How many feet? How many meters did you go?" And he says, "Well, I went down about 2 feet. I didn't find anything. So I said, well, if my friend said there's gold, so it must be there." So he goes there and he digs 3 feet, etc. But he never touches gold. So this is a temptation that many of us have gone through when we're doing meditation. Meaning, Zen might give you a certain sensation, TWIM might give you a certain sensation, Vipassana might, etc. These 3 paths could lead you to gold. Okay, I know at least a few of them do. But you have to pick one. You have to pick one and go and dig deep enough. So it requires a certain commitment. Otherwise, even those 10 days will be a waste. Because guess what? I can almost guarantee that while you're there doing the 10 days retreat, part of your brain is going to say, I should be doing Zen. This is just nonsense. What is this whole business about sensations and this and that? And the moment you start, the other part is going to come in, but I love feeling loving kindness, radiating it all to the... See what happens? Digging a different hole. This doesn't, to my understanding, this doesn't have much to do with the technique per se. It has to do with the person doing the technique. So it requires a certain level of commitment on your part. Of course, you can combine them, but like any kind of an equation, any kind of a formula, if you're making anything, a recipe, a food, if you're making a delicious omelet, a certain type of omelet, and you follow the rules for making a lasagna or making a souffle, well, good luck. You're not going to get that omelet the way the omelet is supposed to be. Or trying to understand Chinese literature, classical literature, by following the grammatical rules of Arabic literature. They don't work. Each one works on their own terms. It's not like there's any problem with either one. So that's what I would encourage you to go back to. And again, it's essential for us. This is another reason why I really appreciate meeting students face to face and really listening instead of just doing it the online thing, which I understand many people are doing the Zoom. I mean, we're doing it, but doing through email, this and that, it doesn't deliver the full spectrum of experience. So the teacher needs to really be there to kind of listen and make assessments and then say, okay, make some suggestions. But the student has to take those steps. How does this all thing, the whole thing sound?
Yeah, I had some thoughts like this, and I think I kind of picked the one, but it's just that it's not so many options to practice with others who want to do the same here.
But I would say that compared to someone who doesn't have access to a Dhamma, if you were somewhere in, I don't know, sub-Saharan Africa or somewhere in the Middle East or somewhere where there is no Dhamma at all, no technique. Well, fortunately now we have the internet, so let's say there aren't access or resources. You are in such a fertile, land of resources, whether it's the TWIM, Zen, or Vipassana. The only thing that I would suggest, if you're doing the Goenka, for example, I don't like to say names, but I just did. Try not to neglect Sila, which doesn't exist there in that tradition, to my understanding, to my experience, in fact. You need to take it every single day, you yourself. Mm-hmm. And also remember what I was suggesting about the opening, constantly opening the mind, meaning the softness that the Buddha talks about in the Satipatthana. Bring that with you, with a smile and forgiving attitude, instead of gung-ho, I'm going to do this, which is what I've seen again and again and again in those retreats. I've done quite a number of them, and have these armaments with you. Things that you've learned from TWIM, things that you've learned from Zen even, if you're going to go. But again, whichever one you pick, just pick one and go with it. And remember, there are no gurus in the Dhamma at all. There are no gurus in the Dhamma. As long as it's the Buddha's teachings, there's no room for gurus. So always, the Buddha always pointed back to the person's heart, oneself. You need to become your own teacher eventually. But until that happens, we need to use the Buddha as our example. So getting access to the suttas is extremely beautiful and delicious to keep you on task. Otherwise, we can just go into this bandwagon of fruitless effort. And then you start beating yourself up. Because then you have only virya and not enough karuna, not enough metta, and everything else that goes along with that. So I hope that helps.
Thank you.
And you're more than welcome to send me, just emails, and we can discuss this further if you like. Good question. Superb. Other thoughts, questions? Yes?
Bante, I have been incorporating the no more Mr. Nice Guy approach, and it sort of feels like when it can create quite a rocky environment. Certainly in the beginning.
How so? Sorry.
My wife and I haven't really spoke very much over the over the last week.
Oh.
But it's on there's a reason for that. We're both trying to process what's going on and things. But when you want to act genuinely kind, that can be it feels like it can be misinterpreted as being weak. So I'm sort of holding back away from that as well a little bit. But because of that, it's creating almost a more of a void and more of it doesn't feel great, to be honest. And I know that I'm not doing that correctly. So I mean, how do you know how do you balance them two while keeping true to the Dharma, basically?
Is your wife telepathic?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Is she psychic? Is she psychic? No.
No.
Okay. We always presume that the other person gets us. If we don't say it, come on, they should know it. I mean, we've lived together for X amount of time. He or she should already get me. And that's the end of the story, and we go and do our thing. And they do the same. They do the same. So there's this lack of communication. Again, it's not the method, it's how much we are willing to become vulnerable with. Meaning, when we communicate, we're putting our thoughts out there, right? Especially if it's a communication that is honest, and that's, to me, that's what communication needs to be anyhow, I mean, right? So, but often we just take it for granted that the other person should know it or should get it, and that's the end. And then everything just, they say something, they don't say something, all of a sudden it's construed in a certain way or misconstrued, and we don't go anywhere. And there is a bigger gash now than before. So my encouragement here would be to communicate that, hey, I've been struggling with this thing of just always wearing my heart on my sleeve or just going overboard trying to please you by doing everything that is agreeable to you so that I can gain acceptance from you. But now I see that, if this is the case, by the way, now I see that that's actually going against my grain, the grain. This is going against my nature. I'm having to answer to myself for that because this doesn't make me feel good. For that reason, I'm electing not to go ahead and just give you all that kindness. Because I feel like my kindness is being thought of as a weakness eventually. Again, if this is the case, if this is what's happening. So my encouragement is to definitely put it on the table and just say, this is how it's going on in my mind, in my life, and I want to heal. And you, as my partner, you're here. I need to tell you what's going on inside of me. I owe that to you and to myself, even more so.
Okay, thank you, Bante.
A lot can be achieved through communication.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that it has a lot, even more so, to do with vulnerability. The image we hold of ourselves in our mind is so, sometimes it locks us in. It's almost like wearing concrete shoes. It doesn't allow us to move forward in life. And then we start becoming more spiteful and resentful towards everyone, including our loved ones, and definitely towards ourselves. And another reason for us to pick up journaling, to write journals, to write how we feel, and not just write it, but ever so often go back and reread them. It's an astonishing adventure. And it's your adventure, which is amazing. And it's free.
Yeah.
It's cheaper than seeing a therapist. You don't have to make any schedules. Nothing. No appointments, nothing like that. But it's important for you to read just randomly things that you've written. Sometimes I notice that many people write and write and write, which is great at that time, but what are we learning from the whole process? Because we do keep repeating certain cycles of behavior. Oftentimes they're unhealthy habitual patterns. And sometimes we grow out of difficult situations. We come loose from these difficult knots. And the journals are there as a signpost to tell us, yes, these things have occurred.
Yes, thank you, Bante.
Of course. Is this helping you guys? Wonderful. Yes? KK?
I just want to add to the question and the answer by saying that sometimes what we think we do out of kindness, the other person can actually be offended by it. And have experienced that both with my spouse, even with Russell. I mean, sometimes I would think that, oh, I'm doing something because out of kindness. And I could say, why are you so sensitive about that? So it's really important to communicate, and then I see his point. So you just have to also kind of negotiate between open communication and the Buddha saying that, do not make, whatever improper speech, because sometimes I would not speak right away because they say, well, maybe if I say that, it will be misinterpreted. If I say that, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to explain yourself, and you would hurt someone before, realize it. So sometimes I won't immediately say what is on my mind, not because I want to be dishonest, but because I've learned what is in my mind. One, it could be incorrect. My interpretation could be totally incorrect. And the other thing is that it could be misinterpreted by the other person. So it's a hard call sometimes to kind of thinking, do you really always speak directly what you think is honestly, if you feel that, oh, the other person can be upset. So it's
yeah.
So it's very hard.
It's interesting because oftentimes speech is led by craving.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Which, when you have this compelling push from within, you're just like, the words are, you're definitely, you're almost barely able to hold them in your mouth. You feel the urge to just, I was going to say vomit them out, but basically that's what it is. It's just like getting them out. I think it requires a little bit more wisdom to hold your ground and say, okay, what is this urgency for? Like, really? Is it the end of the world if I don't say it? Really? And you pointed out something very good as far as, like the Buddha saying, is it, he said several things about, speech. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it necessary? Is this the appropriate time for that? Will this person, once I've said this to them, will they even accept it or not? And there's different gradations as to which one has to, take precedence in these criteria, for example. But a quick way to use, a quick formula that I have been using a lot in my life is, are the three defilements there? Are they sneaking behind my speech? This good intention, oh yes, I have to say this to help this person, da 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 da. But really? Really? Or do I want to tell them something, irrespective of their need for it? Is it nice? Is it kind? Is it drenched in metta? Is it coming from metta, in fact? Even that, sometimes we need to put a lid on it and say, you know what, this has to wait because the person is not ready. Like you pointed out, they might misconstrue it and take it somewhere totally unintended. So we need to use wisdom, because not everything that we think should be said really should be said. Just like not every question deserves an answer. Not every thought needs to be spoken. Most of it's just rubbish. So long as the person is not an arahant, of course, or a Buddha. Thank you for that. Yes, I saw another hand. Yes?
Thank you, Bhante. I would like to take the question and comment further on what was just said. I think, and you have mentioned this a few times, that the Buddha emphasized that for every action, the intention is what's important. And I think, as far as the question, it could be helpful to rest in, put the attention there in terms of asking oneself, what is my intention, and checking in at that level. And if there is, I know from personal experience, if there is a sense of compulsiveness behind the action, if there is a sense of, I have to do this, I don't want to do this, but I have to do this, and a storyline behind it as to why you have to do this, I think that would be a moment worthy of attention, because the kileshas, the defilements, would be the actual actors and not this genuine sense of kindness. However, if one does check in and it seems like really mind is not concerned about the outcome or how this person is going to perceive my action, I really wish to do this, then there's no way you will feel unhappy even if the other person misunderstands or misperceives the action. So pretty much I'm reiterating what you said, but basically my understanding is that it's always again, back to ourselves. Where are we coming from? And if there is this sense of pressure behind the action, sense of compulsiveness, of having to do it, versus I wish to do it. There is no force behind it. It's just pure sense of generosity, dana, but not tension. So craving, checking in with that. Thank you, because this is really helping me to examine and think of examples from my own experience. I appreciate the question.
Yes. The word that you used, the experience of pressure. Pressure creates heat. If you know physics, it's pressure creates heat. Guess what else creates heat? Craving. Craving is tension in the mind, in the brain. Literally, the brain gets tighter and tense. And there is constriction of blood flow. And the more we practice deep meditation, when you're getting deeper and deeper into equanimity, the mind is able, of this practitioner, able to pick up the tiniest little nuances of tension. When you ask them, they can actually point which part of the brain is tense at that time, despite the thought being, even a thought is craving basically, being so small or subtle. So absolutely, when there is pressure, there's heat, which is another telltale sign that there is craving. The defilements are there. If you have questions about, should I not, just check in, like you said. Check in to see if there's any tension, any tightness, anywhere in your body. And remember, the body includes this thing also that we carry over the shoulders, the head. It's not from the neck down. Is there tension? Is there pressure? Do you feel compelled to do this, to say this? Or is there this soft, flowing motion, harmonious motion underneath, which is coming from a point of, almost detached, which also indicates right view often. If there's no pressure, that's a good sign that you're on solid ground. And if you have the luxury of time to kind of play it out in your mind quickly, just the scenario, okay, if I were to say this, and if this person responds this way, check in with yourself while you're running this narrative, this hypothetical. Is there any tension? Is there any twitch in your heart, in your mind? Ooh, I would not like that. Ooh, okay, then we stop. But if you notice that either way, any way the outcome may be, it's still not affecting you at all, meaning the mind is still equanimous and you're really feeling like you're at a good place. You're glad you said that. In fact, you're at a good place. You didn't break any precept. In fact, you're still radiating metta after the fact and after them misconstruing it. Then perhaps that would be the right thing to do. Again, as long as there's no pressure and no precepts are being broken and no one's being harmed. I mean, the Buddha, being the Buddha, didn't like, he was not on everyone's most favorite person list. You know, he had many enemies. One of the things that I was referring to is just like fortune is very conditional. It's transitory. It's anicca, basically. So is one's fame, renown. His own student, his own cousin, brother-in-law, Devadatta, hated him, tried to kill him 3 times at least. But where was the Buddha's mind? How was he throughout? So that state is not something that is preserved only for Buddhas, I believe. It's our lot as well, so long as we are applying the Eightfold Path, starting with the right view. And that's why the Buddha always said, if there is right view, then the rest have a good chance to be followed through the Eightfold Path altogether. And if we're practicing the Eightfold Path, we're getting closer to arahantship. So, these are great questions and comments. I appreciate you sharing all this. It's wonderful. It is gold. And I'm sure a lot of people, I'm really glad people are benefiting, and it's helping everyone. So whatever you share. And I know time's up, but if there's any other one question, I would be more than happy to. It seems that there aren't. Okay, so let us share some merits and to bring some peace and love and kindness and healing to the world, starting with ourselves. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find health relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired, for the achievement of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share in these merits of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, actually.
Before you go, we were discussing in the beginning part of the session that it's kind of running late here. I'm in Armenia, so it's almost, well, it's getting closer to 11 p.m. So we were tossing the idea, and I think I'm going to feel much more comfortable going with it, meaning instead of having it be 2 hours of meditation, to cut it short to 1 hour meditation, but still keep the 1 hour of desana, the Dhamma talk and Q&A. So altogether it will be 2 hours. So again, I'm sorry if I don't want to take away from your meditative practice. However, if you would like, you're of course more than welcome to do, to start your session an hour earlier. But this way, it's not going to affect my health. So I appreciate your understanding in this. So we'll end it an hour earlier, but start at the same time, whatever time zone you're in, because we have people from all over. So I wanted to let you know, and if there are people who are not here today, please, and if you know them and you have their contacts, please let them know, so there aren't any misunderstandings, or people know it basically. All right. So keep. I wish that the smiles never leave your heart, your faces, and please be kind to your mind. Be softer with your mind. Be more forgiving. Life is too short to add more pressure. Life isn't easy, and we haven't had easy lives. None of us have had any. So let's not add more tension and strife in this wonderful work that we are doing in creating gold. We have the gold, we just have to purify it. Sila, Samadhi, Panya, those 3 things. We do that, it's gold. I know it's annoying, but it's wonderful to see you, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Be well.